Best of r/malicious compliance episode 119. Subscribe for edit videos daily. So it was 2 in the morning and I, 16, had just finished gaming for the night. I decided to use the washroom so I wouldn't have to wake up to go later. After a few minutes my sister, 13, started yelling at me and pounding on the door. I continued my business and when I finished I calmly left to talk to her. The conversation went as follows. Me, why were you yelling at me? Sister, why didn't you tell me you were taking a crap? I was about to go in and now I have to wait 20 minutes. Me, why wait so long? Sister, it's gonna smell sewer badd. Me, I didn't know you were about to go in, I'm sorry. Sister, you do this all the time. You take dumps at the worst time, always screwing me over. Me, what am I so poised to do? Sh-tea on the floor? Sister, next time tell me when you are gonna use it so I know. Me, geez, chill out. It's 2 AM. I didn't think it affected you when I used the washroom. I guess if it matters that much to you then okay, I'll let you know. Sister, perfect. Malicious compliance activated. Every time I have to use the washroom I always tell her, and I spare no details. If she isn't within talking or yelling range, I call her or text her. I will stop at nothing to let her know when duty calls. The sheer annoyance that is on her face whenever I walk in and pronounce, I gotta take a monster dump is enough to make my day. This has been going on for a week or so, and here are some of my favorite times. Day 1. Sister is on FaceTime with 4 other friends in her room. I loudly walk in and shout I gotta go to the washroom. I think it might be a wet diarrhea but I'm not sure. I'll let you know after. Then I left. My sister was mad and yelling at me for embarrassing her in front of her friends. I am pretty sure I embarrassed myself more but whatever. The other people on the call mostly laughed. That must have been a weird talk after. Day 4. It was 4:30 AM and I woke up to pee. My sister was sound asleep so I walked in and shook her awake to let her know that the washroom was full. She was too tired to yell then but I got an earful the next morning. That was the day my parents found out about this. Both my parents agree that it's funny and I shouldn't stop. Day 7. She had left to go grab lunch with our dad, so I spam called her at least 10 times until she noticed and when she answered in an obviously irritated voice, I simply stated hey, I just wanted to let you know that I have to pee then hung up. I would have loved to see the look on her face. Day 8. I posted this yesterday and there was a few comments the next morning. Around 50. I was reading through them and someone suggested I show her the post and let her read the comments. So I did that and after reading the comments, she just laughed and said yeah right you're gonna keep it up for that long. That honestly just made me more determined to keep it up more. I will add more stories if there are any new good ones. If anyone has any ideas for ways to do this please leave them in the comments, I will read them. Sorry for any bad formatting, I am on mobile. Edit. Just adhering to rule 8 and adding another story. Thanks for the awards. D. Thank you. Next. My parents had this problem with a guy parking a tractor trailer on their land. He lives right across from one of their pecan groves. The grove has well-spaced trees all in neat rows. The grass is mowed super short. The ground is really flat. It looks like an ideal place to pull your rig if you don't know better. The ground is so flat because they use mechanical harvesting. Bumps and grooves can cause the machines to leave nuts laying on the ground. A 2-inch deep groove from a big truck like that can hold thousands of dollars of nuts and wool until it is fixed. Oh, and you have to get them up by hand. It's a big deal when someone acres with your livelihood like that. So the guy parks there one time. They get it. He probably doesn't understand he is causing so much trouble. Dad goes down, explains the damage he has done, tells him the grove is private property and not to do it again. Dude, we'll call him Dude, agrees, apologizes. Dad goes home, fixes damage midweek. Next Friday there is the truck again, same spot. Dad, not about to put up with this, calls the sheriff department. Cop comes, truck moves. Dad fixes damage midweek. Next week, no truck. 1 week later, truck is back. Repeat complaint for trespassing to sheriff. Dude claims he forgot. He drives over the road and his Home Depot where his car is parked is 30 miles away. It is convenient for Dude to forget because he saves his gas and time by driving his employer's rig and parking it on my parents' land. Dude clearly does not forget every time he is home, but this is what he claims to the deputies sent out on the complaints. After 7 times the sheriff department is called, he finally gets a trespassing citation. No fine is levied. Drives his car 2 weeks in a row. Following week, truck is back. At this point my dad gas fixed this damage so often he is keeping a tractor and blade on the property so it gets done faster and easier. Calls the sheriff yet again. The sheriff himself comes out this time. Truck leaves. Sheriff comes to see my dad. Says the problem is that it is hard to explain the harm when pictures hardly show any damage, and dude always apologizes and moves the truck when deputies come. Says getting dude for trespassing under those circumstances is going to be tough, but he is on this and will see it through for my parents, but his officer's 30 miles away. Not that many deputies to be out patrolling, etc. And then the sheriff, bless his little elected heart, says, but if there was something different like a theft of services going on, cue malicious compliance. Next day, signs go up on 80 trees in a row, 8,000 feet, they are 100 feet apart. Semi-parking, $500/hour. Prepay, violators will be towed. Dude doesn't pay the signs any mind. Dude does, however, pay the tow truck and deputy quite a bit of mind. Comes running and screaming, waving his arms as they are hooking up. Well, before my dad called to have him towed, everything was documented, including having the sheriff himself drive by and take several pictures of the truck parked with the clearly visible signs. Everything is put on hold while dude's employer, who owns the truck, drives out. After 3 hours, dude's boss gives up and writes a check for $7,800 to cover parking and tow truck fees. That actually covered the tow truck, all the repairs, printing the signs, and beer for about a year for my dad's Tuesday poker gathering. Salad. Dude, who still lives there, does not park in the Pecan Grove. His boss payroll deducted his checks for 2 years. TLDR. Trying to stop trespass parking is useless. Charge for parking instead. Thank you. Next. It just occurred to me to post this story to this sub today. Back in the 90s I worked at a Subway restaurant, and had a friend that would periodically come in for food. We inventoried bread so he did have to pay, but I rang it up as a cold cut, cheapest on the menu, and hooked him up with free everything else. Definitely got his $2.10 worth. One day he decides he wants to try salad oil, so I put a bit on his sandwich. The next time, he asks for more salad oil, so I put more on. This goes on for a couple weeks off and on. He wasn't in every night, and progressively asks me to put more and more oil on. The day of reckoning came when he comes in after work, tells me his order, and says you literally cannot put too much oil on there, and goes off to wash his hands in the bathroom. K dude, you asked for it. I probably had the biggest shit-eating grin of all time on my face as I unscrewed the bottle and dumped the remainder of the oil out all over his sub, folding the corners of the paper up so the pool of oil stayed put. I triple wrapped that sucker and bagged it up. He came out, paid, then sat down. He said nothing, merely stared at it for a few seconds, then started eating. He said not a word, but I could tell was trying not to let me hear him gag. I of course heard everything. Eventually he said goodbye and left. He didn't speak of it outside of work, but the next time he comes in and orders, I go to reach for the bottle and he stops me. Dude, no, you broke me. You win. I was literally shitting oil all night long. To this day he still gags when he thinks about salad oil. Edit. This was closing shift, which was a solo deal in the 90s. I could get away with anything. Thank you. Next. Back in high school, we had this history/civics teacher. He was young, and actually gave a shit and tried to make learning about the way Congress and the Constitution work fun. He was a good teacher. Let's call him Mr. President. Mr. Prees was also a little nerdy and loved to get off on technicalities, and while he was cool, he was inflexible about rules that most teachers didn't care about, wearing hats, eating a snack quietly, water bottles. I'm sure he was trying to make some larger point about discipline or structure or something. We had class with him during 4th period, right before lunch, so we were always starving in his class. One day during a break between 2nd and 3rd period, we hear from other students that Mr. Prees is doing an exercise today where he lets the class act as Congress to make a bill to change a rule. He would act as the president with veto power, but the Congress could overrule him with 2/3 of the vote, like the US Constitution states. Of course periods 1 and 2 shot for the moon with legislation like no final or no more homework which passed unanimously, but Mr. Pre said sure I'll take a look and continued class, at the end revealing that he was pocket vetoing the bills, a chicken shit loophole where the president can just not sign or veto a bill and thus, it would never come to the 2/3 vote. It was a way for us to learn about the president's powers and balance of powers etc. Anyway, cut to 4th period. With that inside tip, I convinced our class to vote on something he might actually consider, the ability to eat and drink in class. We were hungry AF, after all, and most teachers let us eat in their classes. We draft the legislation, get majority vote, and Mr. Prees receives our bill. You know, in the other classes, I wasn't going to entertain this, but I'm just going to veto this. If you get 2/3 majority vote, it's yours. To which we then re-vote, get the votes, and the rule is changed. Next day, our first day allowed to eat and drink in class, I showed up with 2 coolers and a bag full of plastic champagne flutes, hide them in the back before class. About halfway through class, I stand up, start handing out champagne flutes to the class, and pull out a dozen bottles of ice-cold Martinelli's sparkling cider, pouring them and handing them out to everyone in my class. What are you doing? Blat 00M. The bill passed. Well, at least pour me one of those. The class erupted in laughter. I poured him a glass of cider, and we toasted to democracy. Mr. Prees was a good teacher. Thank you. Next. So I work in a kitchen as a cook at a bowling alley in a small Michigan town and this story takes place during a league on a Thursday night. Usually the ladies on this league usually are not bad, they all loved me back when I was on the floor. However there is this one entitled Karen that always sends stuff back even though it's always made correct and her orders are super complex. When I worked this one Thursday night she sent back wings saying it's not cooked enough when the manager and I both knew it was horse shit. Then the waitress who does her lane said that she wanted us to make a pizza instead for compensation. We looked at her like WTF and the manager said I'll handle it and asked the waitress what the entitled Karen wants on her pizza. Then the waitress came back with Karen's order and he said watch this. As I finish other orders I notice that the pizza isn't in the normal circle shape but in the shape of a dick. I had a big grin and once the waitress saw it she was chuckling before taking it to her. We never saw or heard her reaction but she never did send back food. Thank you. Next. Edit. TLDR. Compliments of Foxtrot Sierra Tango. OP is in a wreck but fine. EMT is worried and tells OP to not move and behave as though their neck and back are broken. EMT adjusts OP and OP pretends it hurts. EMT is worried that something is broken but ultimately realized that OP was being a smartass. Throughout my teenage years I worked a weekend job that started at 7 a.m. One of the mornings that I overslept had really crappy weather. The wet snow had been accumulating and had turned to 4/6 of slush on the road, Michigan. Being the 16-17-year-old driver that I was, I thought going 5 under the speed limit was slow and careful. Very close to making it to work on time, I lost control. Small Honda with a hatchback hit an embankment and the vehicle rolled onto its roof. It didn't hit the embankment head on and I was really surprised that it rolled. Nevertheless, it was a very serious accident. After speaking with my boss and the police, didn't receive a ticket. My nerves had calmed and I was ready to deal with my parents. I was really wanting the whole thing to be over with. Almost an hour later, I was sitting in the passenger seat of a bother vehicle when the EMT came running up. Out of breath and taking her job very seriously, she inquired about my health and if I was hurting anywhere. To which I replied very calmly that I was fine, I had no pain. She cut me off and promptly told me not to move, to let her do all the work and to pretend your neck and back are broken. I don't know why, but just as she pulled my legs to the side to turn me toward the open car door, I let out a painful yell. The EMT stopped dead with wide eyes and said, What is it? Where is your pain? I calmly looked at her and said, oh, I'm not really in pain. You told me to pretend my neck and back were broken. I don't remember exactly what she said under her breath, something that included smartass teenager, but the long, Quiet ride to the hospital with my head taped to that board, and that lady sitting next to me was painstaking. Because I wasn't badly injured and my parents didn't kill me like I thought they would. I can remember with great fondness my quick response and her reaction to my malicious compliance. God bless her for doing her job, and all the EMTs who put up with teenagers like I was. Thank you. Next. TLDrAtBottom. I initially posted this story on r/tales from your server. I think it fits better here and I've included more information for story cohesion. I'm a pasty white Caucasian guy. I pretty much look ginger, but I'm not a redhead. This is relevant to the story. For almost 8 years, I worked at a popular U.S. chain restaurant which specializes in breakfast food that may or may not heavily feature various flavors of pancakes. Over time, several managers came and went, but the one who stuck around was the ladder climbing, brown-nosing GM, whom we'll call Hope, a narcissistic, verbally abusive, control freak mommy dearest knockoff. Hope had the most grandiose opinion of herself. She had a way of making please and thank you sound like screw you. I did my best to get along with her. Although when dealing with someone who thrives on conflict, the best often isn't enough. She made it clear, it was her way or the highway. Her oft-spouted catchphrase was, if you don't like the way I run my store, quit. Among Hope's countless trademark annoying traits included, breathing, coming into work wasted and talking smack about everyone to guests and staff alike. She often delivered instructions orders, without allowing any responses, then concluded those interactions with MK as if that couldn't get any more obnoxious. Her faux sincerity was almost always accompanied by an annoying crypt keeper cackle. Then she'd roll her crap brown eyes, toss her mouse brown hair over her shoulder and walk away. Funny story. One Christmas, I was unlucky enough to draw Hope's name for the Secret Santa gift exchange. I seriously considered buying her a batch of wire hangers with a card simply saying no wire hangers ever. I decided against it for the simple reason that it was no secret that I did not like her. It would have been totally obvious who bought her the gag gift. I was one of those highly valued employees, but the way I was treated completely belied the compliments and accolades I received, i.e., my schedule being flipped without my consent, day off requests being denied, while other employees, mostly older married women and single mothers of small children, as well as Hope's drinking buddies, got preferential treatment, always taking the side of the guest when they were angling for a free meal, etc. Perhaps the worst was the bullying and pettiness among certain employees. It was like high school. It got to the point that I flat out refused to exchange numbers with or add any co-workers on social media. It was a rule that I stood by for a very long time. Don't mix business with personal. I've somewhat relaxed that regulation, but for the most part it's still in place. Once, while in the dining room, another employee poked me in the face with a tampon right in front of guests as well as Hope and Sunny, the drunken assistant manager. I filed an official complaint and nothing came of it. This is one such occasion where they couldn't claim ignorance. My complaint made it real and they had to address it. They did. They saw me as a whistleblower. Neither Hope nor Sunny could have cared less about staff morale. It was typical of both of those embittered hags to accept hearsay as fact. They rarely did their diligence in getting both sides before plotting a course of action. Oh, and plot they did. Unfortunately, the following shows they responded to my complaints to workplace bullying with malicious intent. It was at this point I began receiving customer complaints. Most of the time Hope and Sunny would take the word of the so-called customer or the server passing on the complaint without offering up any proof a discrepancy had even occurred. I later came to learn the complaints were completely fabricated. It was really a co-worker just trying to stir the pot. This whole horror story came to its climax when a cokehead, now former employee, circulated a rumor that I refused to wait on an elderly African-American military veteran because I was a racist. Being one myself, I respect all veterans. I found it alarmingly laughable, at best, because 1. I am a very gay man and 2. Most of my boyfriends haven't been white. Hell, everyone including Hope and Sunny met my Brazilian ex-boyfriend, who looked black, when he had previously popped in for Sunday brunch. So, you can understand why this accusation was out of character and completely out of the blue. It reeked of sabotage. It was too outlandish to be anything else. So, the write-up came. I was absolutely furious as my suspicions that I'd been set up were confirmed. Both Hope and Sunny would not let me get a word in. I finally got their attention by stating, in a raised voice, that I had a right to have my say. Surprised at my assertiveness, both went slit-eyed and rather smugly said, "Go on." I pointed out to them that all of my guests love me. Several of my regulars are Hispanic or African American and, in nearly 8 years of employment, never once had I been accused of being prejudiced or bigoted. I also pointed out that one of my regulars, a married female African American doctor, if my hands were free, would run up to me, give me a big hug, kiss me on the cheek and hold me so tight I felt like I was being suffocated. Hope and Sunny were having none of it. I also pointed out that the drama-starting liar who filed the complaint against me had been fired because she was caught by Hope snorting cocaine in the ladies' room. Given her predisposition to lie, the validity of her accusation should be questioned and the write-up destroyed. Based off of their surprised expressions, it was clear I had exposed their complicitness in creating a hostile work environment, but they refused to take the bait. Completely done with it all, I flat out bellowed, "I am not, nor have I ever been, a racist." I'm pretty sure the entire store heard me. Then I went for the zinger that lingers. You have no idea how many black men have been in my bed. You could have heard a pin drop. Dimanda, the Creole prep cook, was walking by the open office door when I let out that line and she nearly doubled over with laughter. There were 2 training managers facing away from us while they were on the computer doing online courses. They almost collapsed onto the keyboard, then turned around looking at me with shocked expressions on their faces. Sunny's face went beet red. Hope's face turned white and her eyes widened. "You know what, Hope? Remember how you said if I didn't like the way you ran things, I should quit? Goodbye." I didn't give them a chance to respond. My shift was about to start in less than 7 minutes. I took off my key fob, laid it on the safe, emptied my apron, put everything in a takeout bag, did an about face and walked out echoing, "Have fun trying to cover my shifts." It was exhilarating and liberating all at the same time. It was like the end of Private Benjamin, when Goldie Hawn walked out of her wedding and threw away her veil, except I've never worn a dress. Just kidding. Yes, I have. Aside from returning 2 weeks later to get my final paycheck, I haven't set foot in there. I have no reason to back. I have a new job at a wonderful company with great bosses that value me as an employee and as a person. I actually look forward to going to work now. I never thought that was possible. Double plus, they don't expect me to be an emotionless robot. Doctor, I slaved away at a horrible job for nearly 8 years working for malevolent bosses. They tried to play me. I played them right back and got my mic drop moment. Edit. For those of you who are triggered and declaring that I could still be a racist or that my attraction to ethnic men is just a fetish, tell that to my boyfriend and kindly FK in the direction of off. Save your race card pulling, unintelligible psychobabble for someone without a brain. We all bleed red. It's people like you and my former witch boss who create the problems in this world.